Let's talk about McLaren. Now, a lot of people are saying online that McLaren should have used some team orders during the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, but why is this? Is this the correct thing? Was this the right thing for McLaren to do? Did it seem like it at the time, or only with the benefit of hindsight? I'm going to get into everything you need to know about this, guys. So overall, I would say that McLaren probably played this pretty well from the team point of view. I'll explain why during this video. So late on in the race, we had a safety car period. Oscar Piastri chose not to stop. He chose to keep his track position. However, Max Verstappen ahead of him and Lando Norris, his teammate behind him, both stopped to put on some new hard tyres. Piastri was on old hard tyres, so both Verstappen and Lando Norris had a performance advantage against Oscar during the restart. Now, you might say that Oscar Piastri should have come into the pits and changed his tyres. I think he probably should have done, as long as he had a fresh set of new hard tyres to put on, but I'm not privy to what they actually had at that point available to them. Now, this basically meant that their faster car, in theory, Lando Norris, was starting behind Oscar Piastri, so effectively their best opportunity, in theory, to go for the race victory was starting behind Oscar Piastri. Now, Oscar Piastri had a chance to challenge Max Verstappen. He very much had an opportunity to do so. Of course, he started on pole position, and he looked as though he was going to keep his P1 into turn 1, or at least the first braking zone. I believe there's a little kink that technically counts as turn 1 around Imola. But Max Verstappen's incredible around the outside out-braking manoeuvre meant that Verstappen got P1. And from there, it was very much the case that it seemed as though that Red Bull was the fastest car. He was pulling out a gap. He was looking pretty comfortable. Now, McLaren, to their credit, unlike in Suzuka when they had a similar situation where Verstappen was leading and their two drivers were behind, they didn't go for the same strategy. They went for a split strategy. Norris going for the one stop and Oscar Piastri presumably going for the two stop, although weirdly it ended up with Piastri doing one less stop than Lando Norris, just with the way that the safety car and the virtual safety cars actually worked out. So should McLaren have swapped the drivers around? Well, I think, to be honest, if you go from the team point of view, if you go purely for a team perspective here, trying to go for that victory, trying to stop Max Verstappen, then yeah, they should have done, because Lando Norris was the faster driver. Now, Lando Norris did come on the radio and did say, look, you know, I'm the better chance of winning this race. If we want to win this race, we got to swap us around. However, McLaren didn't really share that point of view. At least they didn't say anything to Oscar Piastri anyway. There was no questioning as to whether they should invert the positions. It was never said on Piastri's radio at the safety car period. And indeed, they didn't swap around. It took a good few laps for Lando Norris to get past Oscar Piastri. Now, by that time, Max Verstappen had built up a pretty decent gap. And indeed, after he overtook him, it still was a pretty big lead that did in fact grow towards the end of the race. Now, you might say that, well, if they actually let Lando Norris go past straight away at the first opportunity, then maybe his tyres would have been not as worn down. And yes, that is technically true. His tyres would have been fresher at that point in the race. But I struggle to think that, you know, spending 3-4 laps behind his teammate actually made his tyres that much worse, especially the hard tyres, which was an excellent race tyre and very durable, of course, as well, the hardest compound available to them during this weekend. So I don't think that would have made a difference. I think even if they did swap the drivers straight away, which is risky at a restart, of course, the field is so bunched up that, you know, Charles Leclerc, I think, was in 4th place at that point, would have very happily tried to put himself between the McLarens and make it awkward at that actual restart. It's a very long run down from the Ravazza to the first braking zone in Tamburello. A very risky thing to do, so I can totally understand why they didn't do it straight away as well. And also on top of that too, the Drivers' Championship. Now, I don't want to say, especially as a McLaren fan, I don't want to say that the Constructors' Championship is wrapped up for McLaren, but at this point, they're in an incredibly dominant position. It is very hard to see anybody else being able to challenge them for the Constructors. Mercedes are not consistent enough. Ferrari are not consistent enough. Red Bull don't consistently have two cars up in the top 5. You know, Max Verstappen's on the podium almost every week, but Yuki Tsunoda has yet to really get anywhere near to that, you know. So at this point, it looks as though McLaren are eschewing pretty much for the Constructors. Still a very long way to go. So the real question mark is around the drivers, and both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri will rightfully believe they have an opportunity to win the World Championship this season. They absolutely both should, and I know they do. That is what they have to do. So I think meddling with that, for lack of a better term, kind of involving themselves with that, I think would have been a wrong move, because it very much could have upset the team dynamic between Oscar and Lando Norris as well. Even if they swap back after, I feel like that would have been a bit of a hard pill for Piastri to swallow. And actually, in the hindsight, when it comes to that as well, I do think overall that actually benefited Lando Norris, because Norris wasn't going to catch Verstappen anyway, and he overtook Piastri. So if they did do the thing where they swapped the positions, they actually inverted them, then Piastri would have been able to get past Lando Norris, and Norris wouldn't have been able to overtake Piastri during the closing stages, most likely. But yeah, those are my kind of thoughts on that situation, guys. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, share, comment, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world today, guys. See you very soon.